So we're in our backyard talking about the three plant paradoxes. So animals solve their survival problem through movement. If they're in trouble, they can move. If they're thirsty, they can go to water or food sources, or to protect themselves, they can run away or fight back. Plants don't move. They're stuck in space. They're sessile. So there are three things that plants do as a result of their sessile nature. Number one, get the resources they need. Number two, move pollen and seeds so that they can reproduce successfully. And three, to defend themselves. So the first plant paradox is that plants need water, nutrients, and sunlight to photosynthesize. And if they're stuck in one space, then they need to go and capture those three resources. Animals have determinate growth patterns, which means that from birth, genetically, our growth form and length is predetermined. Right? So at birth, I was going to be 6 feet tall, and there's nothing I could do about that. Plants, in contrast, can grow in any direction they want based on capturing limiting resources. So a really good example of this is light. You can see this tree right here. It germinated in between these two structures right over here and was in a really shaded environment, light-limited environment. You can see that it grew up, and then using apical meristems on the tip, these growth points, cells were divided and lengthened, and it started to grow. And it didn't grow randomly. It grew in a very specific pattern. You can see where we live right next to the mountains where we get a lot of morning shade. And what this plant did through indeterminate growth is it grew branches really long out to the west so that it would be able to capture a lot of that afternoon sunshine. And the same thing is happening down in the roots. At the tips of the roots, there are these apical meristems that are sensing limiting resources like water and nutrients, and then growing the roots in that direction. The second paradox is that plant reproduction requires movement. Pollen needs to be moved from male flowers to female flowers, and seeds, once the fruits are mature, need to be dispersed in the environment. And the mother plants can't move. So what plants do is they use a lot of complex organic chemistry to influence and manipulate the movement of animals to spread pollen and disperse seeds. So lots of examples here in the garden. You can see there's flavors, smells, colors that attract the attention of pollinators. You can see bees buzzing around these flowers on these plants in here in the garden. You can see the red color of the tomatoes in contrast to the green leaves. You can see our bell peppers, different colors, oranges, reds, and yellows. You can see the really cool trumpet flowers of our squash plants growing in there, attracting pollinators. We have a beehive back there, and they just buzz in the garden all day long, seeking for sweet nectar rewards that the plants offer them, being attracted by the colors of the fruits and the flowers. You can see our black-eyed Susans, just how beautiful these flowers are. The cone flowers that are pink. Throughout our yard, we try to provide lots of flowering resources to pollinators to draw pollinators into our garden so that plants will thrive. And then the third paradox is that plants, since they can't move, but they still need to defend themselves. So there's two major things we're going to talk about. First of all, they build physical defenses. Think of spines or thorns, sharp objects. So I often, at the invitation of my neighbor, go into his backyard and prune down his roses that kind of grow too tall and shade out our berries. And the other day I was finishing up the roses and I saw this tree that looked undefended and much easier than pruning these really sharp rose bushes. And I went over there and it had these spines on there that were like hypodermic needles, really, really sharp. So imagine deserts going in. Desert plants are storing water in their stems, and they have lots of spines and prickles and sharp objects to protect themselves from animals that would try to access or eat them. Another example of this of chemical defenses are these tomatoes. If you look right along the stems, you can see these trichomes that give off the smell that gets on your skin when you work in tomatoes and pick them. Okay, and these trichomes are like little microscopic suckers, and inside the sucker is a sweet substance that leaf-chewing insects can't resist. And when they ingest it, as little caterpillars, it emits a body odor that attracts the predators of these little caterpillars. And then the predators come and eat them. So the plant is using chemistry to attract caterpillars that then calls in their predators to it, and that ends up protecting tomato plants. And then there's this other example of ways in which plants protect themselves that I wanted to show you. Here's another kind of example that you can see of physical defenses on the spines of this miner's lettuce, just little spikes that make it kind of difficult to deal with, especially on the bottom. You can see the little spines right there that would prevent, and then they also produce a latex inside, that white stuff that doesn't taste very good and in some cases can be toxic. The other thing I want to show you before I get to the last thing is the quaking aspen here that are regenerating down here. Growing in our garden. These quaking aspen saplings that come up produce phenol glycosides, and they're extremely bitter. So it protects the aspen as they're regenerating so that they can become new trees. So we planted this lapin cherry this last year, and I came out here and it wasn't growing very well, looked very unhealthy, and then I started to notice that the leaf margins were getting eaten by a leaf-chewing enemy, some kind of caterpillar of some sort probably. And so I didn't know if it would survive. We went on a trip and came back. And what I noticed is that the tips were just regenerating and producing new leaves beautifully. So this is what we call tolerance. So the plant doesn't protect itself chemically. It doesn't produce physical structures like spines to protect it. It just takes those resources it would have used for physical or chemical defenses and stores it in the form of carbohydrates in the woody tissue to protect it. And then after the leaf-chewing insect completes its life cycle, the plant will mobilize those carbohydrate resources and create new growth. Right? So it escapes the enemy and it grows most of its leaves and does most of its photosynthesis when its enemy is gone and finished chewing on the leaf margins.